Hello there, welcome back to the Chap's Guide channel. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now occasionally I like to drop a video in just like this where I kind of take the sartorial temperature of the world. I talk about maybe something that's come up in the news where we are seeing standards of smartness, of style, fluctuating in some way, for the good or the bad. And just the other day, I was reading my newspaper, The Times, here in the UK, and I noticed there was an article in there which talked about a change in the dress code for the US Senate. Now, I'm sure many of us are not familiar with the US Senate. I am a British citizen myself. I've not got a great idea about how the American system of government works, but basically, the Senate is the upper house of the two houses of Congress. The lower house is the House of Representatives, the upper house is the Senate. There are 100 senators, 2 from each state, and they represent their states in this upper house of government, and they've got a number of important statutory governmental functions such as ratifying treaties, confirming ambassadors and military commanders, and lots of other stuff relating to the legislation of the country and things like that. And just recently there has been quite a shift because, as you could imagine, operating at that sort of level of government, and if I was to put a comparison of the Senate into my own country, the United Kingdom, of course we have a bicameral government system as well, so an upper house and a lower house here. In the lower house, members of parliament, they're the day-to-day representatives of us citizens. The upper house is called the House of Lords, and it is essentially not dissimilar in structure to the Senate and the House of Representatives, just to put a clarification on it. But as you can imagine, people who operate at that level, you are the public face of your government and to a degree your country as well, because operating at such an important strategic level for your nation, you're going to be seen as a representative of your nation. So you would imagine that people would dress in a way commensurate with that position. You would expect people at least to wear maybe a suit, a collar and a tie at the very least. Now you would imagine that such an important place of business as the Senate would have an established dress code so that members know how to dress, and we're going to represent our country properly in the way that we attire ourselves when we're in our place of work. But you'd be wrong. There is no formal dress code. There is, however, an unwritten dress code which suggests that male members of the Senate should wear a tie, a jacket and basically a suit. This is what you can read into this unwritten dress code. However, this has all been thrown out through the window recently, and not for the better, because Chuck Schumer, who is the Senate Majority Leader, so the sort of leader of the Senate, I'm guessing, has said that this unwritten dress code will no longer be enforced within the chamber. Now you might think, why? Why would you sort of deviate away from what appears to be a pretty standard way of dressing, business attire for the upper house of government in one of the most important countries in the world? You would think wearing a jacket and tie isn't going to be difficult, at the very least for a member of this Senate. However, it would appear that the dress code has been diminished, or no longer is enforced at all, to accommodate one single member, and that is Senator John Fetterman. Now John Fetterman is the representative of Philadelphia in the US, and he's a big fellow, 6'9" in height, but he kind of cultivates a public image of being an ordinary man. So basically, Philadelphia is a very large city, lots of blue-collar people there, lots of, it's a working city. It's part of the engine room of the United States of America. And I'm guessing that John Fetterman has, as I say, cultivated a public image of being, the ordinary guy. And he often is, seen carrying out his constituency work, wearing a sweatshirt, a hoodie, shorts and things like that. So that's the image he has gone down. Now in the past he's publicly said that senators should be able to wear what they want, and he has been turning up for work wearing the most casual of clothing. And I guess over time it would seem that the Senate have bent to the ideology of Mr. Fetterman, or Senator Fetterman, and they have now accommodated him by changing the rules of the chamber for senators so that they can wear their own choice of clothing. Now, people who work in the Senate and the aides and the other, the back office folks who make things work, they've still got to comply with, these unwritten rules. But John Fetterman and his fellow senators, they no longer have to. It's not gone down well. I said that, this has been a bitter pill to swallow for people who want to see people dressing well and representing their country globally in a fine sartorial light. I think here a fellow politician of John Fetterman's, Monica Crowley, has publicly stated, and I read this to quote it correctly, John Fetterman's dress standards have hastened the decline of the Senate, and Fetterman himself was a revolting slob. And I quote her words. So you can see there were quite strong thoughts on this. Whatever your thoughts, it's a decision that really got me thinking about how politicians, our democratically elected representatives, dress around the world. So I thought I'd go on a bit of a trip to see how other countries have taken this stance, since now in America, in the Senate, you can basically wear you want now to work. Now, where else would I go but my own country to start with? So here, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, to give it its full title, the UK between you and I. And basically, the UK is a great place to start because many people think of the UK as, a country noted for its sartorial elegance. And of course, here we are fortunate to host London, probably one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world, but certainly the very, as I say, epicenter of men's style. We've got Savile Row in the middle of London, Jermyn Street, and all of these other sort of places which are very closely linked with men's tailoring and, the way that style, and Carnaby Street, of course, as well in London. So style at its very sort of beginning to the world. Not only that, but in Britain, in the UK, we have the mother of all parliaments, the Palace of Westminster, so where the Houses of Parliament are situated. Here in the UK, not dissimilar to America in some respects, we have a bicameral parliamentary system, so a lower house and an upper house. Houses of Parliament, the sort of MPs who sit in the Houses of Parliament, they are the equivalent of the sort of representatives in the states of Congress, and the upper house, as I said, is the House of Lords. So very much a political place of work where people are visibly demonstrating the machine of government taking place. So you would think we would have quite a solid dress code for the people who work in the Palace of Westminster. But you'd be surprised, despite a 1,000-year history, where we take democracy very, very seriously here. So much so that at one point, when our king threatened the democracy of our country, the parliamentarians and the citizens rose up and they separated the king from his head, of course, when King Charles I went to the chopping block when he wanted to become, an absolute tyrant over the country. And then we established our system of democratic parliamentary representation. So I checked the Houses of Parliament dress code to see what is the expected mode of dress for members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords. And you'd be surprised, actually. It's not what you might think. It just says that, and there is a rule book on how people act, how people behave, how they speak in Parliament and so on, but there is no exact dress code required. And in fact, the rule book stipulates that usual business dress should be worn by members of the Houses of Parliament. Although it does go on to state that jeans, t-shirts, sandals and training shoes are not appropriate, but further it then goes on to clarify men need not wear a tie, but jackets should be worn. And it's interesting to know that ties as a mandatory item of wear, I say mandatory, suggested item of wear, have been optional in the Houses of Parliament, or certainly in the Houses of Commons, since 2017, where the Speaker of the House, the person who maintains dignity and the order of play in the Houses of Parliament, the Speaker, John Bercow at the time, enforced a rule that ties need not be worn from that point onwards. So even in the Houses of Parliament here, this constitutional powerhouse of democracy from around the world, you can pretty much get away with a lot more than you'd think in the Houses of Parliament. So I thought to myself, okay, let's go to another old world country then. Not far away. I'm only going to cross the channel, 20 miles. I'm going to arrive in the Republic of France to see what their legislators and lawmakers are expected to wear when they are at their place of work, which of course for them, and I'm not a big knowledgeable person at all, but the French Assemblée Nationale, kind of the equivalent of the Houses of Parliament here in the UK, are where their democratically elected representatives go to undertake their activities. Dress codes. Okay, so I was interested doing some research to find out that a number of the members of the Assembly had written to the President of the Chamber of the Assembly to complain of the dress code which has been slackening over time in the French Assemblée Nationale. And I think the direction of travel was that many of the new left-wing parties which have entered French politics have taken a sort of affront to having to wear quite old-fashioned, well-styled clothing, as we would call intentionally well-dressed men, and they had sought to buck the national trend and within the boundaries of the rules. So they started wearing very brightly coloured ties as an act of rebellion against what they would see as rather stuffy and old-fashioned rules about dressing well. And what happened there was that the Assembly issued a defined dress code just to ensure that nobody is under any misapprehension of how they should dress. So what it actually said was outfits should be neutral, appropriate, not untidy, with a jacket mandatory and a tie recommended. And it further clarified that clothing with political slogans or logos should not be worn. So even though they have defined their manner of expected dress, again, falls within what you and I would probably describe as kind of casual, maybe business casual, but without a tie. So in conclusion, how would I round up my observations on what I've discovered here, prompted by this sort of change in the dress codes within the Senate in the US? Well, I have to tell you, I was very surprised. I would at least have expected that people working in the public face of government, and obviously in the lens of the global press, would at least want to show themselves for the best possible side that they have, to dress well, to put a jacket, a shirt and a tie on. Is it really such an imposition on your personal liberties as a human being to expect you to dress respectfully in a place where you're going to be seen by the people who have elected you to be there, and people from around the world will see you as the person enacting the laws, legislation and the necessary government administration for the country in which you represent? Now, I think that is an unfortunate slide in the wrong direction. You know, I think my son goes to a school where they insist that they wear a blazer and a tie. Why is it that children have to dress like that, but the people running the country can choose whether or not to wear a tie and can effectively, as in the Senate now, dress as they see fit? It seems like there's an imbalance in the way that we are attiring ourselves, and it makes me worry about the future, because, you know, where is it going to end? If we're saying that our legislators can dress as they want, what's the next step? You know, people will be wearing their pajamas to government, and it's disconcerting. But I may be wrong. Perhaps I've taken the temperature of the world wrong, and my ideology is all askew. Perhaps I'm the fool on a shirt and tie and wearing a jacket when I want to demonstrate my elegance to somebody, or where I want to show somebody that I have respect for them because I'm dressing in a respectful manner. Tell me if I'm wrong. Let me know in the comment section below. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. You want to see more like this? Click the subscribe button. If you want to throw a question into me or bring a point to my attention, send me an email. I'd be delighted to hear from you. If you'd like to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee, or you can even become a patron. And I make additional video content for my patrons, and to find out how to get in on all that, you'll find the information in the show notes below. So, until the next time, show the world that you're better than the dress code of your government. And I will see you again very soon.